In this video, we're going to analyze different ways to look at culture in a more creative sense, which should help you analyze markets more effectively and see how you can better integrate your marketing campaigns in different cultures. And it's really exciting. It is definitely one of my favorite sections. So we talked about in my other video about what is culture from a quick sense of high context versus low context as an introduction to culture. But a little bit more further, high context cultures, messages are implicit and indirect. So what you're going to be looking for is voice, intonation, the timing, facial expressions. All these will play a different part or a full part, holistically speaking, in interpreting what the messages should be. And for example, there are many different ways to say no in Japan, because saying no directly is seen as rude and breaking harmony. So it is more appropriate to use different expressions. For example, when somebody is requesting something and the other individual goes, just assume that's probably a no, or that there is a barrier. And this isn't sales, like there's never a no and there's always a yes. Take that down a notch and just remember there's obviously a barrier here you have to fully understand. In low context cultures, people accomplish things by objectives and tend to be direct. So the communication doesn't have to be, you don't have to worry about all these like little extras, but all those extras, if you learn it in different cultures that are quite high context, you'll learn to look at your own culture, particularly as in the United States, much more differently, and we're more prepared to see how people are feeling and acting on things, and we can read into things a little bit more correctly. Always be careful about reading into things when it comes to low context cultures, because reading into it or inferring could have major drawbacks. But the other style you want to look at is contextual versus personal styles. Contextual styles is one that focuses on the speaker and the relationship of the parties. For example, higher power distance cultures or collective and high context cultures, the relationship to the party matters. For example, if it's a senior member, like a CEO or a president that is speaking, that's going to have different context than, say, a manager even, or a regular assistant. So those change factors. Personal style focuses on the speaker and the reduction of barriers. So instead of focusing on the relationship, we're looking at the reduction of barriers. And that's where you see low power distance and individualistic cultures shine more, where we don't want things in the way of the communication, so we focus on the individual. Another interesting thing is affective and instrumental styles. Affective style is common in collective, high context cultures, characterized by language that requires the listener to note what is said and observe how it's presented. The meaning is often nonverbal, and that requires the receiver to be intuitive and decipher. There is a method to this. If you become more and more expert into the culture, you'll recognize it more. So do not assume, and infer incorrectly. Instrumental styles is goal-oriented, focusing on the sender who sends the clear message to the other party of what he or she wants the other party to know. Common in the individualistic, low-context culture. So if you see something that's require you to listen a little bit more carefully, or the message is not always clear, that's going to be affective. You have to feel the affection of what's happening. Instrumental will be, what is the goal? If there's a goal that's clearly present, that's how you'll present in that culture. You'll be surprised, some cultures mix into the two of them, and such as in Russian culture, you would have to be effective at both to communicate. Nonverbal communications in culture, some of the three coolest ones will be, of course, the transfer of meaning as body language and use of physical space. Things such as kinesics, communication through body movement, eye contact, posture, gestures, hand gestures, be careful with those, and chromatics, the use of color to communicate messages. For example, go back 1 second. I love the eye contact and posture and chromatics. I really want you guys to take your time on this. It is important to me because just because somebody doesn't look at you, some cultures, looking in the eye is seen as negative or too overbearing. So some cultures, looking down seems more appropriate, or looking away does not mean someone's lying or there's some negative reasons for it. And it also does not mean you have to take advantage of someone's different way of communicating because they're not looking at you or has a more perceived weaker view of communicating. That is inappropriate and not okay. They're equally agile into any other way of communicating. This is it. You should accommodate to that and be understanding. Chromatics is the use of color in messages. This is the same as symbols like the LGBTQI plus flags, that the different ones that are existent out there, to how colors are seen as power or affection. And these things will help you in a different culture, especially if you're marketing certain products and services. Knowing which ones will trigger and amplify the correct message that you're trying to send will help. Nothing worse than talking about death and something beautiful and celebratory with white, and in one culture that's seen as death and negative, and you're now using white and they're seeing it as something as bad has happened. So do look at chromatics. It's a pretty fascinating study. Proxemics is really interesting, especially in the context of cultural communication. Here, space and distance between individuals matter a lot. I ask this in class all the time. How do you feel space? We tend to have a pretty distant space when we communicate with each other. Do I talk about it? Yeah. It's the study of the way people use space to convey messages. The intimate distance is used for confidential communications, you'll see. Personal distance for talking with family and close friends. Social distance used to handle most business transactions for more space. Public distance when calling across the room. Vary in different cultures. For example, an intimate distance in some of the Arabic cultures is a normal way of personal and social distance for communicating. It's a way to bring it close and ensuring that information is communicated well. And it's not just that, you're some intimate individual they know. You could be somebody that they have some baseline interaction with, and it will be a little bit more closer. Or, for example, in some cultures, holding the hand to walk you through. It's not seen as any weird way. It's a great way to create a connection and seen as normative in some cultures. And that is truly fascinating. So proxemics, do not feel uncomfortable in some situations where you're in a different culture and they seem kind of close to you. That how you respond will be affected by that. So be careful and enjoy it. People have very different ways to connect, and this is one of them. Chronamics, or the view of time and scheduling. Monochronic time schedules versus polychronic time schedules. Monochronics tend to see time in a linear fashion. Managers address issues A, then B, then C. Schedules are important. Time is important. And you should be careful to not be late. Polychronic schedules, people tend to do several things at a single time. They place higher value on personal involvement. Schedules are subordinated to personal relationships. Very fascinating here. In a monochronic schedule, there's a little variations between all of them. Austrians, for example, like to view things chronologically, but they're not worried. They like you to be on time, but not crazy early. They finish work early. Germans like to be very precise on time. Polychronics, for example, they tend to juggle things at once. You'll be in a meeting and someone's on the phone at the same time. Just be respectful of that. But also in personal relationships, have more emphasis. Some people will, to be early is to be on time in Japanese culture. In some cultures, to be late is to be on time. In Mexico, you show up to a party early, you're innately volunteering your assistants to help prepare it because they're not going to be ready. So if they say 8 p.m., plan on maybe 10 p.m. or later. And if you're there at 8 p.m., you're probably helping them. So that's what I love about chronemics. And it's not your time, it's their time. Always respect that. So these are different elements to look at. Culture, there are variations amongst them, and learn the different ones before you arrive. That'll give you a little bit more headwind on what to expect in a different culture, whether someone's going to be closer to you, whether they would value time differently. Are they going to be goal-oriented versus focus, interpersonal relationships-based. So all those factors play a role, and you'll find that that's going to be more fun.